Well, I'm really happy to have the opportunity to be here and have lunch with Bud Wright, your new CEO, in effect. And he's, of course, an old transportation hand and spent many, many years working on these issues. And I was thinking back, I think I could be wrong, I think the first AASHTO conference I went to was back about 25 years ago in Albuquerque, New Mexico, if I remember right. And it took me a while as a person coming from outside the transportation field and being on the committee and sort of trying to get oriented to kind of realize what is this AASHTO and what's it all about. And it gradually dawned on me that this is really sort of the nexus of the whole federal thing, because you have the federal Department of Transportation and highway people and funding and framework, and then you have all the state departments of transportation where the job is really done. And how this helps the states work together and intermediate and be effective in negotiating with and talking and raising issues and getting them decided properly at the national level. So it's really a very important organization, and thank you very much for letting me join you. I have an opportunity to work collaboratively with Schusters, and and I think Bill Schuster is determined to do a good and effective job, and if he doesn't, it won't be because he hasn't been working his tail off and trying. I'm sure he's going to be a very good chairman, and he selected someone who's well known in this room, Chris Bertram, who we most all have had an opportunity to work with in one capacity or another, as he's worn hats on our committee staff and over in the Senate and over at the department, as a person who's very, very knowledgeable and responsible and able in this area. It's a great person to work with. And our Chief of Staff, Jim Tynan, is a fellow who's sometimes pretty intense. He really wants to do a good job. I think he's okay to work for, though, for the rest of the staff. And anyway, and Debbie Gephardt is my chief of staff, and who came from the Transportation Committee, means that we have a number of people here who are not just playing lip service to, but who really do want to be as effective as possible in our primary job up here in Congress, which is really to try to do what we can to deliver the resources the nation, marshal the resources the nation needs to have a first-rate infrastructure. And then, of course, we have some responsibility to make sure that it's as wisely and effectively spent as possible. The public demands that. And we're eager to work with you. I know you had earlier sessions, how to communicate all this. We clearly, just because you're elected, the sad truth is, in most cases, you're not able, whether you're president or a member of the House or Senate or some other role, able to wave a magic wand and say, do it my way, and everyone jumps and says, do it. But if the public decides, even if it's not a complete consensus, but if there is a growing concern in the business community and other parts of the public that there is sort of a hole in the safety net that they're relying on, if the transportation becomes inefficient or there are opportunities for it to be more efficient than it is, even if it's doing okay, they're going to start demanding first-rate service. And we've got to kind of communicate that. And the big caveat is to make sure they realize that it's being thoughtfully and well spent. And that's where all of you come in, because a few bad stories and it sets the whole thing back because people feel they're being kind of conned instead of getting the thing that they need. So I'm very conscious of that. I really think our committee and, of course, our counterparts in the Senate can be helpful in trying to highlight the need and to work on the on this education process, and we're eager to work with you on figuring out how to tee up different hearings and aspects of this as effectively as possible. And I'm a big believer myself in not just running around sort of yelling at people and saying how inadequate things are and how we got to do a better job, but trying to celebrate success where it does occur, because that success breeds success and makes people feel good and shows it can be done, and then also trying to paint a picture of what we know where we are, but what if we make intelligent investments well, what is the future that we will move toward more quickly or better than if we don't. I was chairman last Congress, and before that with Jerry Costello as my chairman, ranking on aviation, and then before that chairman of this committee again for a while. So I've been involved in this a long time. But aviation, we had a stalemate for a long time, as we do now in the highway area, where although there it wasn't as much lack of resources that was really the roadblock which we're facing, but just different factions not being able to look at the big picture and looking at pieces of it and refusing to compromise to get something done. And so we'd gone through, I think it was 26 or something like that, short-term reauthorizations of the federal aviation program. And Costello and I really worked pretty hard at trying to identify, and we called it Next Gen, which came out of the Transportation Department, and paint a picture and also help the department focus more and the industry focus more on what this was and what the promise of it was, and getting because everyone's saying, oh, it's chicken and egg. Oh, it's wonderful, it's going to do great things, but it's going to be tomorrow, and why should I invest in it, and so on. And now, so we're trying to figure out how to give people a little advantage if they do invest in it, as opposed to the person who doesn't, and so that boards and airline companies start saying, why aren't we re-equipping our fleet or taking advantage of some of the things that are out there? And I think we have some opportunities. Now, they're not quite the same, but to talk about the future of surface transportation and the world that lies out there. And we were talking about this a little bit, Bud, when you visited at the office, and I just had the chance to meet for the first time. He gave me his card, but I can't pronounce his name. He's he's Secretary of the State of Michigan. Kirk. Yeah. Is that close? All right. All right. But he's saying something I've been interested in. He actually validated this, because half the time you read this stuff and it seems science fiction-y and it's pie in the sky and it's never going to happen. But he says, no, they're working on it like beavers in the auto industry and in Michigan, and that we're going to be having driverless vehicles and largely automated. So there'll be a huge transition and so on. But there are a lot of issues as you work your way through all this. But you start painting a picture of that and what the advantages are going to be in terms of greater safety and greater efficiency in the system and greater utilization of existing capacity. You may be able to add additional lanes under certain existing infrastructure and all the rest. It gets people's attention, and they want to learn more about it, and makes them more willing to help pay to bring that about. And it clearly is very important for our national and standard of living and our international competitiveness to facilitate. We don't want to waste money on pie in the sky, but we don't want to either ignore opportunities or underinvest in areas where we can get a really good, honest payback. And I think transportation, especially eliminating bottlenecks in the system, is something that is absolutely vital. And people who fly, frequent flyers, all these systems now, just in time, depending on the efficiency of the system, and the bottlenecks cascade through that system and cost an awful lot of money. And therefore, to the extent we can figure out how we can link investment with increasing efficiency in the system, we're going to have a lot of allies in the business community and in the traveling public that we might not otherwise have. And it's not just a regional thing. I happen to live in Wisconsin, and some say, well, let's turn this whole system back to the states by and large, and we can have a competition between the states, and the states that invest adequately in their infrastructure will have a competitive advantage over those that don't, and that's great. The trouble is you could also have a race to the bottom if you're not careful. And the other thing is there are some areas where they can't solve the problem within their state borders. Wisconsin is one of them. We're in the shadow of the Chicago rail bottleneck, as an example. And this is very important to us. If we could get first class, just-in-time, efficient movement of rail through that bottleneck, we would see costs lowered a lot up in our region. We'd see a lot of stuff move onto rail that's now being done in trucks that can't use bulk commodities that don't make within 3 weeks, fine. But if you need parts and other expensive things that just in time, it just doesn't work right now. But it could. I mean, there's no technical or real reason why it couldn't be much more efficient, but the infrastructure just was built for a different generation and a different time and needs to be upgraded and modernized, but we can't do it in Wisconsin. We'd have to rely on some sort of a regional or national coordination of this industry, local and national investment. So I think we're all involved in a pretty important thing for our country, and anyone who listens to or is a sort of a history buff, reads about how wars are won and all the rest of it, you know as well as I do, one of the most important elements of it is the logistics side of it. And that doesn't necessarily automatically win every battle, but it's sure, if you don't have it, you're very likely to lose. And so that's the way I feel about for our own country. We need to have first-rate efficient infrastructure. And you know as well as I do all the international statistics, and we don't invest as much as Europe, let alone the Chinese right now. Performance measures is another area that the thing deals with, and how that's working in practice or where that stands is again another focus of the hearing, and they will be asking questions about. I guess the issue of national freight involves not just rail, but obviously surface transportation infrastructure, and there are opportunities there, as you know, after having cold feet, partly because they had a new and I think quite effective director at the Trucking Association. So they held back for some years on whether they would support an increase in the diesel fuel tax. They now decided they got to pay for it somehow, and they would much rather pay for it with the diesel fuel tax than being targeted with inappropriate tolls. And so they are supporting that. One area is that of innovative financing. We're going to be taking obviously continuing to look at that and how that would work. And I myself look at it as not as a panacea. I think my chairman once said, well, you can't really borrow your way to prosperity. Well, maybe you can sometimes if you have a really good idea and you borrow and invest in it wisely and then develop a product or a service that the public buys, and suddenly you can pay off the debt. So it can be appropriate in some circumstances, but it's clearly not, you're not going to have innovative financing between Idaho and North Dakota in all likelihood, and some of the other areas, but it's vital to have a national system, and you need, and you don't want it cherry-picked. It's just really not fair to the trucking industry or the other states or anyone else. Although, well, I won't go into examples of that, but because you can't blame people for doing what makes sense in their local situation. But anyhow, we all know the big lion or elephant in the room is the where the funding comes from, and if you stand back and try to look at where the future is going. We had funds authorization programs in the last bill to which Oregon has done, and I think to some extent Iowa, to have a mileage program, and we'd really like to build on that. It's being done in other countries. Germany has it for their trucking industry on the Autobahn. Holland's in the process of doing it. And most people think it's probably the way we're going to be going with all the efficiencies in fuel use and alternative fuels and different types of powering vehicles and all the rest. Using the gas tax as a proxy for road use is something that worked in the 50s, but it's not going to work in the 2050s. And but how we get from here to there is not a technical problem. It's being done all the time. It's amazing what apps there are on your hand computer, and I don't know how we need privacy protections. But my personal feeling is that people don't really raise privacy issues when you're talking about a Garmin or a cell phone or some of these other things. When in fact the technology is such that they know where you are, right? So I think it's that people, if it means you're going to get this and you're going to have to pay, people say, oh, think of whatever excuse you can use, and I don't really want that. But so we have to figure out how to get over that. And my own thought, for what it's worth, but I haven't been able to find a taker, is that I would think it would make sense to get a national framework out there with this technology that states and even local communities, if they were going to do a bridge or something else, could plug into, so that there might be this annoying 10 cents toll to pay for this bridge, but you could sign up and just drive and it would be collected off satellite. You wouldn't even have to necessarily put in a lot of infrastructure on the ground. But to get that, you got to start somewhere. And I've been trying to convince some of the big trucking companies and trucking associations that it would make sense for the big interstate trucking firms to work with the department and maybe some outside experts looking at what they're doing in Germany and other places to devise a system that would work for them. And as far as I'm concerned, revenue neutral. Maybe they could get a discount for off-peak use of trucks, and you could tell the public, hey, it's a great thing because you'll have fewer trucks during peak load hours. That's good. And that gives it some legitimacy in the eyes of the public. They understand, they're using all this technology already, the big fleets, and so it's just more or less for their own internal purposes. So it's just an add-on. And then we could build out from there if you could once get it deployed. But they haven't bought into it yet. I think there's some competitive issues and other issues, and maybe they think they would get socked. It'd be a national toll sort of a system. But it's a little different than being cherry-picked if it's a system approach. So anyway, we'll keep working on that and continue to work with you to try to be as effective as we can as we meet our nation's needs in the transportation area. Thank you very much for letting me join you for lunch. I wanted to mention, I'm hoping you're having this wonderful reception after, at the end of the day at the Botanical Gardens from, I guess, 6 to 7. Our subcommittee, working with Joe Rahal and Pete DeFazio, we're trying to work on a bipartisan basis much more this time, and Bill Schuster is committed to that as well, I know, to be to increase our effectiveness in moving the ball of funding transportation forward. And it's very hard for the committee to be as effective on a partisan basis than if we can be united on the committee, which is one of the largest committees in the House of Representatives, after all. So we're having a bipartisan reception for people who are interested in surface transportation. A lot of the associations and unions and others in town, in the Rayburn Building, in the committee hearing room at 2167. So if any of you are around visiting your state delegations, 5 o'clock, and yours is at 6. So if you're going around meeting people and it gets to be 5 and you say, what am I going to do for this next hour? Come on by and say hello, and we might have a Wisconsin beer or something like that and some cheese, and we can talk about some of this stuff some more. So thank you very much.